Alright, it's time to fly the next heavy assault cruiser. This is the Omen 2, or if you prefer the EVE Online terminology, then this would be the Zealot. Now, I have to say right away that the Omen has a very, and I mean a very nice looking hull. Now, I have a sleeper core on this ship. I believe that the sleeper core is one of the best nano cores that you can use on the heavy assault cruisers. But in the end, it doesn't matter what nano core you have, all of them will work really well. Although I have to say that the sleeper nano core does give a very nice hull color on the ship. Okay, let's take a look at the ship info, at the basic info. Now roll bonus plus 5 seconds damage control activation time. Advanced medium laser operation bonus will give you minus 12% medium laser capacitor unit, minus 6% medium laser activation time, minus 5% inertia modifier for the advanced cruiser command bonus, and the advanced cruiser defense upgrade will give you plus 5% armor explosive and plus 3% armor kinetic resistance. Overall, very nice. Should be a pretty solid armor tank. Now the Omen has 1 drone, 5 high slots, 3 medium slots, 5 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs, a smaller cargo hold than the other cruisers, 17,555 defense, primarily a armor tank. It should have really good armor resistances. 3,111 gigajoules is the capacitor, recharge time 558 seconds, recharge time per second 16.63. Overall, a pretty good capacitor. I would say the largest capacitor out of all the other assault cruisers. It can lock 7 targets, 80.8 is the signature radius, and the other stats are generally okay. Now the sensor strength is 16.7. If I recall, the Vexor had 0.37, and I just want to double check that. Now I believe that's because the Vexor is a drone boat, so the sensor strength might be low on that ship for that specific reason, while the other ships with turrets have a much better sensor. Where is the Vexor? I don't see it on the ship tree. Where is the Vexor? Where is the Vexor? There is the Vexor. Okay, let's quickly take a look at the stats on this thing. Just wanna make sure that the sensor is 0.32 is the sensor strength on the Vexor, which is lower than the strength on the other assault cruisers. I just want to double check that. Now this ship is not the fastest, but it should be pretty tanky and it should have a very nice range with lasers. 584.14 DPS, and I use C-type pulse lasers. They have a 16.38 km optimal range, accuracy of 6.5 kilometers, 50.7 is the tracking, activation time 3.68 seconds. They don't use a lot of capacitor because of the skill per level bonus. In the low slots, in the medium slots, I have 1 Scrambler, 1 Nosferatu, 1 Web, and 1 Drone. In the low slots, 1 Afterburner, large armor repair, damage control, and dual adaptives. This is the classic build, classic tank PvP build for the heavy assault cruisers. On the rigs, I have two 2P combat integration modules. They're focused on armor kinetic and armor explosive resistance. Now I use the tier 4 rig here because I ran out of tier 3 rigs, but the same combination works with the cheap integrations. It doesn't have to be tier 3, it can even be tier 2. It will work about the same. And the third rig here is I believe a 4P combat integration that is focused on resistance, armor repair, and it does give my ship extra armor volume. Now you don't have to go with a 4P rig, a 3P rig or even a 2P rig. The cheap ones included also work really well. And of course you don't have to use tier 4 rigs. Tier 3 or tier 2 rigs will also do the job just fine and work about the same as this current fit that I show you here. In the engineering rigs I have 1 auxiliary thruster, semiconductor memory, and a capacitor control circuit. Now, the defense, 43,481, 11,356 armor hit points, 54, 57, 66 and 68% resistance on armor, which is honestly a pretty solid value. 3 minutes and 23 seconds is the capacitor time, and the speed is 427.20 meters per second. Okay, let's undock and let me show you the active stats on this ship. Should be, pretty tanky. It also can do speed tanking because the ship is it's not slow. Should be faster than the Vexor, but we will find that out very soon. And of course, the modules are not in the same layout as I placed them before, so I have to quickly adjust that. Okay, and now this is how I like to have the modules on my cruisers. Okay, let's turn everything on, afterburner on, adapt is on, and let's take a look at the fit. Now the DPS is the same, 666,396 hit points, 66,000 heart. Okay. 76, 78, 83 and 83% resistances. Pretty solid. Capacitor 3 minutes and 21 seconds. 1,024.72 meters per second is the afterburner speed, which I think is a little bit faster than the speed on the Vexor. Now with the damage control, the tank is almost 200,000. 92, 93, 94 and 94% resistance, and with the second damage control with the sleeper core, the tank is 394,000. Now the DPS is a little bit lower because the sleeper core does reduce your DPS, but it does enhance the capacitor and it does enhance the ship resistance. And with the sleeper core it's stable at 59.5%, which is honestly really solid, and it does look really good. For 30 seconds you will have phenomenal capacitor, and with the sleeper reactive 88, 89, 91 and 92% resistance, which is nice. One of the, I would say, literally the best nano core that you can use on the active tank assault cruisers. I have one for the stabber and I did use it for PvP. So far it runs really well. Okay, let's dock and let me show you couple more builds. Now you can also swap the damage control for a reactive hardener. You will lose the passive effect, but you gain active resistance against basically lasers, drones, and in some cases the railguns. Single or dual damage weapon types will have a very hard time to break a tank of a ship that uses a reactive shield or armor harder. Okay, let's take a look at the active stats. You still have the damage control with the sleeper core, so that also stays there. 68,188 hit points, 78, 79, 83 and 83% resistance, which is really nice. Actually higher stats than with the damage control by 2,000 hit points, and that is very interesting. With the sleeper core active, 137,977 hit points, 89, 90, 91 and 92%, which is nice. Each resistance is higher by 1 from the previous one. Did not expect that, but very interesting result. Okay, let's dock and let me show you the docking request accepted on this ship. Now you can use a capacitor battery and a Nosferatu at the same time if you sacrifice the reactive or if you sacrifice the damage control. This ship does have a very nice power grid, and this will enhance the capacitor runtime by a lot. Now it's 4 minutes and 26 seconds. This is a large afterburner, large armor repair, a medium afterburner, and with this build you have dual armor repairs. I know some players prefer dual armor repairs over a large armor repair. In some cases it does repair faster, and it's also easy on the capacitor. And with this build you can use a large Nosferatu. Now the capacitor is 4 minutes and 27 seconds. The power grid is barely there. It still has some of it left. We can also use a large Neutralizer with dual armor repairs, but with this build, if you don't have the sleeper core, then I recommend that you use capacitor batteries, because the Neutralizer does also kill your own capacitor, and a capacitor battery is going to help to maintain a capacitor for as long as possible. Okay, let me show you how this build works. Now with the sleeper core, using a Neutralizer is very nice, because you can quickly recharge back the capacitor. You can use the Neutralizer at the same time as the sleeper core. That will also have minimal effect on the capacitor for this ship through the entire 30 seconds duration. Okay, let me quickly adjust the modules, and then I can start shooting at the station. I will use all of my modules active with the dual armor repairs. Neutralizer active, everything is active. In a real combat situation, you'll be using all modules, so I'll be turning on the armor repairs. Now, how long can this build last? Now, the game tells me 1 minute and 45 seconds. Now, in reality, you can turn off the Neutralizer on and off, depends on when you need to use it. So, in reality, in a actual combat situation, your capacitor will last far longer than what's stated on the fitting menu there. That's because more and more players learn very good capacitor management in their fight, and that helps to prolong the capacitor runtime. Now, with the capacitor battery, you can see that everything does use the capacitor quite a bit, and this is where the magic of the sleeper core does kick in. Now, with the stabber 2, I did use this with a Neutralizer. It works really well with a large Neutralizer, and that build works really well when you have to take out a tank target. With the Neutralizer, you kill their capacitor, you kill their tank, and then you slowly kill their ship. That's how this works, and from personal experience in PvP with the stabber, that does work really well. Now, with ships that use a energy weapon that basically runs on capacitor, that might be a little bit more difficult, because your weapons also take a chunk of the capacitor while they shoot. But with the sleeper core and with the right capacitor management, that's not going to be a big problem. Now I'm waiting for my capacitor to be low, and then I can turn on the sleeper core, and you can see how quickly the capacitor starts to recharge. Now it's capacitor stable. It's a decent capacitor stability actually, 41%. And this will last for about 30 seconds, and this is enough to quickly recharge your capacitor. And as you can see, the capacitor battery is also coming out of the cooldown. I also just realized that I have the wrong implants installed. I have the drone bombs. Well, let's use the drone bombs on that one drone for the lulz. And now the capacitor battery is back in action, which will prolong the usage of Neutralizer, and it will prolong the usage of the armor repairs. So if you have both of these items, if you have both the analog core and a capacitor battery, then your ship will last a very long time. It could be a very nasty opponent, and these assault cruisers really did become very good with the last November balance patch. The extra
Docking request
tank
accept.
made them really fun. Okay, now we can also use a dual web build and a capacitor battery. This works really well against small fast ships. I still have the afterburner, large armor repair, a capacitor battery, and dual adaptives. The capacitor is 2 minutes and 41 seconds. We can also use a build like this, replace the adaptive into a damage control. Should give you 18 seconds of really high armor resistance, good for hit and run operations.
Undocking.
However, the assault cruisers are really good for endurance battles because they really do last a very long time in a fight, of course with the right build. Okay, let's take a look at the ship stats with this current build. 54,000 hit points, 68, 70, 76 and 78% resistance. A little bit lower than with the previous builds, but you get the active stat on the damage control, and this will give you 160,000 hit points, 89, 90, 92 and 92% resistances for 18 seconds, which, you know, could be nice for a passive armor tank, although for a passive armor tank you don't really have to use a capacitor battery. You can go
docking request accept.
Full resistance, and you can use a large armor plate. Now you can also use beam lasers. Beam lasers have high range, higher energy usage, lower tracking, and about the same alpha damage as the pulse lasers. Now, since this is a long-range build, I would use a warp disruptor with dual webs. The webs are primarily for defense. If the ship does get close to you, you can web them and slow them down, or you can use a defensive scrambler, which also works if the target does approach you, so that you can web and scramble them, slow them down, so that you can track the target even below 13 kilometers. I have an afterburner, large armor repair, damage control and dual adaptives with this build. Now, in my personal experience, I like to use micro objectives on my long-range ships. I did use it on the Ashimo, the kite Ashimo with the dual webs. That worked really well. And you can use this ship as a kite too. It should be pretty quick.
Undocking.
We're about to test out the maximum velocity. Now, the one thing that you will notice, the capacitor will be a little bit lower because the micro object does take an impact on your capacitor by, I think it reduces the capacitor by 15%. You can easily counter that by using a capacitor battery or using a Nosferatu, although this ship cannot fit a large armor repair and a large Nosferatu because the power grid requirements are pretty big for those two modules. 409.08 DPS, 76, 78, 83 and 83% resistances. 115 seconds on the capacitor, which is really low. 2.2 kilometers per second is the micro object speed, which is a little bit faster than the Vector 2. Of course, you can make the ship way faster. It might appear to be on the slower side because I only have one auxiliary thruster, but if you add 2 or even 3 auxiliary thrusters, then I'm pretty sure that this ship can go about 2.5, 2.6 kilometers per second, and that is quite speedy. Okay, let me dock and let me change the build again. The one thing that I don't like about this build is the capacitor. It doesn't run really long, and ships that use neutralizers might be able to chase this ship away. Now, with a capacitor battery, I was shocked that I cannot fit it. So this is a medium capacitor battery, so that means I have to change some of the rigs. It needs one power grid rig. Let's fit the ancillary power grid, and now I should have enough power to turn on the battery, and battery is turned on. The capacitor lasts 1 minute and 16 seconds. The power grid is almost nearly maxed out, and with this build the capacitor should technically last much longer. You can also use a medium Nosferatu. It surprisingly does barely fit, only 9 power grid to spare, and it did improve the capacitor by a little bit. Now, you can't fit a large Nosferatu in this ship, unfortunately, because of the power grid. Even the low tier large Nosferatu will simply not fit. Now let's take a look at the implants. Well, you won't be using the bombard implant, that's for sure. Let me go and take the focus crystal. Now you can use both pulse and focus crystal on the ship, on both pulse and beam lasers. Focus crystals are good against missions, can be good in PvP, but you have to be careful not to miss the target. If you miss the target, then the implant does reset and you lose the DPS. Now the level 15 skill or attribute goes on extra armor, and the level 30 attribute can stay the same. I think I still have the general unit setup for the Phantasm. That means I will have to change the general units. Yeah, this is for shield. Okay, don't use shield general units on the implants if you fly this ship, because it's not going to be very helpful. So let me quickly go and find the armor units to slap the armor repair up to armor repair boost, not optimizer, because the boost does increase the armor repair strength, but it does increase capacitor usage. Now for this ship, having extra Nosferatu range if you run the beam setup might actually be a good idea, because that way you can extend the Nosferatu optimal range and you can take advantage of your target's capacitor even at 18-19 kilometers, which should be the optimal orbiting range for beam lasers. Now the capacitor 3 minutes and 58 seconds, which is really nice. With pulse lasers, optimal range is 9.6 kilometers, but the strength has been improved and the armor repair has been also improved with the general unit. Level 15 is more than enough on the implants. Level 30 if you really like the ship that you're flying, but level 15 is more than enough. Having two general units is also more than enough. It will not make much of a difference if you have 4 or 6 of them. Okay, let's quickly readjust the modules again, because the game does not like to remember when I place them, so I have to relocate them every time I undock, which is okay. Let's open fire at the station, and here I will show you the maximum possible DPS that you can get on the pulse lasers using the focus crystal. I have hit 5.99. Now with every hit the implant stat will go up and you will get extra DPS, so maximum is 180%, and at 180% you will get maximum possible DPS on this ship. So far it's rising nicely. Now at 180%, let's take a look at the DPS. 1,500, which is really nice, almost about the same as the Phantasm. Tank built with 1,500 DPS, and it's a cruiser. A pretty scary little boat. And if you have the need to use extra armor, you have a free armor plate. You just click on the skill and you get 100% of armor. Emergency armor plates can be useful in some very dangerous situations when your ship is actually going down.
Docking
can
request
help
accepted.
to prolong the lifetime of the ship, and it can actually make you escape the fight and survive. Okay, now let's take a look at the pulse crystal. Now the pulse crystal is dependent on your ship's capacitor. The higher the capacitor, the more DPS it will do. Maximum possible DPS is 75%, and it is a immediate effect upon activation. No charging it, you click on the implant and you get extra DPS. And these are the secondary attributes that I have for the ship. It generally works for all laser ships. And this implant is also called the Battleground implant because the Battleground has the best capacitor out of all ships. As for the general units, I have to change them for a armor tank. I still have the Phantasm setup. This implant is also good for armor tanks because the shield on the armor tanks is, well, useless anyway, so you might as well use the shield to recharge your own capacitor and therefore increase the DPS, which is really nice. Don't use this implant on the Sunshine ships because Sunshine ships are not armor tanks, they are shield tanks. And this implant can kill your Phantasm or Nightmare or any other Sunshine ship that depends on shield. And with this implant I think I also get a passive damage increasement, 638 DPS. And with this implant, I recommend that you go slap a capacitor battery just to maintain the capacitor at a higher level, because this ship does have a reduction bonus on laser energy usage, but the implant does increase the energy usage,
Undocking.
so you want to counter that as much as possible. Okay, let's undock, and let's aggro the station. This poor station has been shot at by so many ships. Okay, implant is active, and as you can see, I am depleting my own shields, but I'm also increasing the capacitor, and the capacitor battery also helps to maintain a high capacitor state. 1086.40 DPS, and this DPS is permanent. As long as you have high capacitor, you will have really solid DPS. Even if you miss the target, you don't have to worry because the damage boost will stay there. Overall, a really solid implant. And on this ship, it does work really well. Of course, when the shield is empty, you can turn off the module, because you can turn off the secondary attribute because it's not going to recharge anything. And the capacitor is still at about 95%. So overall, works really solid, and I'm personally quite happy with the results on
Docking request accepted.
on the implant on this ship. Well then, I think it's time to go undock and have some fun with this Omen. Very curious to see how this ship will work. Now I just can't help but keep on looking at this ship, because the Omen does look really good with the sleeper nanocore. I don't know, I have the same skin on the Revelation, and for some reason the sleeper nanocore does look exceptionally well on Amarr ships. Okay, let's go and quickly clear all of the ships here. Now, usually I always target the small ships, and with this implant, with the focus crystal, you have to be careful not to miss the target, because as you can see, the second you miss, you lose the implant charge, and when you lose the implant charge, well, you lose the DPS. And I did miss, of course, that happens right at the start. So I lost the implant buff that I had, and I have to slowly recharge it again. This might be very tricky in PvP, because you might lose all that DPS in case you get jumped while running a mission. And speaking of missions, the Omen with this exact build can easily run low sec story missions. It can run them really safely and quite efficiently. Still, it's a lot safer to run storyline missions with a cruiser than a battleship, because of the mobility that you get on the small ships, while the DPS is still going to be about the same. In storyline missions, it doesn't matter how fast you can clear the mission, it matters that you can clear the mission safely, without having to worry about losing your expensive ship. Now, like I said before on the start, you don't really have to use really expensive rigs. The cheap integrations work flawlessly, and I would actually recommend, if you like to combine effects, if you like to combine the rigs to get basically one of the best possible combinations for your ship, then the cheap integrations are the way to go. They cost about less than 100 million, and they basically have about the same effect as the ones that cost a couple billions. So in the end, in the longer run, the extra stat that you get from the more expensive integrations, it's not going to help much. So even the cheap integrations do work really well, and if you would like to replicate a build like this, then I would recommend that you use the cheaper integrations. They're very easy to replace, and you don't have to worry about losing your ship, because it's not going to increase the price by a lot. If you want to keep the price even lower, you can use lower tier rigs. It will reduce the overall stat by a little bit, but at the same time it will drastically reduce the IP cost of the ship. And all that still will mean your ship can do everything that the ship with higher integrations can also do. Now with the general units, tier 4, tier 3 is also more than enough, although you don't have to worry about losing them, and if you have the ISK, then the high tier ones are actually really solid. I use mostly tier 8, I have one tier 10 I believe, for the Macarial, for the barrage implant, and honestly it works well. It worked really well even when I was using a tier 1 and tier 3 unit, so in the end it really doesn't make much of a big difference, because if you're winning a fight, you will win the fight even if you were using the lower tier units. In the end, I believe that there's a very nice balance between price and performance. Having the most expensive stuff is nice, however it's not really necessary. You don't have to go with the most expensive stuff every time. The less expensive stuff is actually a lot more worth, because you get basically the same thing for a much cheaper price. However, if you have ISK and if you really want to max things out, then you can go with the more expensive integrations and with the more expensive general units. Although, again, the integrations are good. However, you can lose them, while implants, even if you lose your ship and pod, the implants are still going to be there. So the implants are, I would say a safer investment, because there is no IP value to the implants. Although you have to recharge them with time. I think I have to recharge mine very soon because it's running low. Now for the integrations, if you lose your ship, the integration rig can be recovered, but the contents of the rig are lost. So that's also one thing to look out for. Now I also thought about using engineering rig integrations, but I believe it was completely unnecessary because the normal rigs already work really well. However, if you would like to combine and push the performance of the ship a little higher, then the integrations of course will work really good. It really depends on what you want to do with the ship. For missions and for PvP, a build like this that I have here is going to work really solid. I like to focus my ships to be both PvE and PvP capable. That way the player that uses the build has a good chance at defeating a incoming pirate in low sec or even in null sec, while more PvE focused builds usually don't stand a chance against a incoming pirate ship, even in low sec, in null sec, because that build simply doesn't have the modules required to engage a PvP ready ship. Now you can also use warp core stabs, although I would say that it's not necessary to use them. However, if you feel safer flying a ship with stabs, then I guess you can go and go with warp core stabs. However, with warp core stabs I encountered the problem where I didn't have enough capacitor, I didn't have enough speed. So with warp core stabs you do get a very good chance at escaping, but at the same time you also will have issues with the ship speed capacitor, and it might actually affect the combat performance of the ship. So by losing the capacitor rigs, the ship's capacitor will be lower. By losing the auxiliary thrust rigs, the ship will become slower, but at the same time you can easily walk away if tackled. However, there's still the danger of the enemy player using multiple scramblers, using a fleet to hold you down, and in that case, if that happens, even stabs are not going to help a lot. In that case, having the other rigs is actually a better survivability chance, because then you have a better chance at fighting back. And it's I find out that it's actually very easy to fight back, although I noticed a lot of players do panic, and the one thing that makes players lose their ship to pirates in low sec is when they panic. If you panic, you already lost. Doesn't matter what build you have, doesn't matter what ship you have. Panicking means you will lose the ship. Because when a player panics, they tend to make a lot of mistakes. And I'm talking from my personal experience. When I started with Eve, I did used to panic quite a bit. But with time, as time went on, you do get that confidence, you do get used to the game, and once you start to understand the game, then everything becomes a lot easier, and of course a lot more fun. Now here I will test out the armor repair. I'm taking the damage on purpose. As you can see, it does clear the mission really well. I really like the implant on this ship. The armor repair is active, and that's a very fat armor repair there. It does recover 2,300 every cycle, so a couple cycles and the armor will be fully repaired. 3 cycles for 50% armor, 6 cycles for full armor. That combined with the sleep nano core means that you can tank for a very long time. Even if you use a capacitor battery, you can still tank for a very long time, because the speed tank and the resistance tank on this ship are really good. Now, I've also seen some passive armor tanks with plates, and honestly, I personally really like that idea. With a passive tank, you don't need a lot of capacitor, you don't need a lot of velocity, although you would need speed because the armor plates do slow down your ship. But a passive armor tank could be a pretty scary ship if we include the sleeper core. You have 18 seconds of damage control and you get 30 seconds of sleeper core, so that's 48 seconds of having really high armor resistances, and you also have a lot of armor. You will have about 25,000 armor if you use a large armor plate on this ship. And you can also activate the armor plates, you can also enhance the plates with the general units. There's a lot of options and a lot of combinations that you can use for this ship to make it work. Now that would be a passive armor tank, would be a PvP build. For missions, use a active tank, because you will have to actively recover the armor on the Omen. Just checking out what's happening here. Okay, the camp is still up and going. So, what are my impressions for this ship? I really like it. I honestly really like the Omen 2, and I don't know. At the moment, I did fly all of them. I did fly all of the 4 heavy assault cruisers. The first heavy assault cruiser that I was flying was the Stabber 2. I already used that ship into PvP for solo PvP, and really impressed by the performance of that ship. So I already know what to expect when I go and fly the ship over here again. But I see the advantage and disadvantage of these ships. Every ship has that. And honestly, literally the best thing that happened in the last update was the buff to the assault cruisers. It made them literally be like the EVE Online heavy assault cruisers, the tier 2 cruisers. And I'm still very excited, and I will be very excited for the visual effects update in December. If they end up changing the looks of these ships to match the EVE Online looks, not only will I be happy, I will be flying the cruisers full time. That's something that I haven't done in a very long time, I know, but having the chance to fly the Vagabond again in this game, that's a wish coming true, and I'll have a blast flying that ship, honestly. And there's a chance that I'll just go and buy all of them, because I already have maximum cruiser skills. I have maximum skills for all cruisers. After all, I'm primarily a cruiser pilot, so of course I have the best skills for these ships. So, very interesting December update coming ahead. And, well, you can expect a lot more of these ships to start appearing in the game, because they are becoming a lot more popular because of the update. Overall, again, the resistance update on these ships is amazing, and everyone that I spoke to is happy about that. A lot of my friends also started buying the heavy assault cruisers. Not really sure if their price has increased. I know the Vexor 2 price has actually decreased when the drones were nerfed, but since the drones were buffed a couple days ago, the price might have actually returned to the former value, perhaps even a little bit higher. I guess we will find that out. And I'm slowly finishing up with the mission here. This ship did clear the mission quite fast, actually. I'm pretty impressed by the tank. Very satisfied by the DPS. Very satisfied by the overall feel of the ship. It does feel every one of these heavy assault cruisers does feel unique. It's like they all have their different personality, and that does make them a lot more like the EVE Online ship. They basically have the same feel now. Alright, well, with that being said, it was a very nice little run with the Omen 2. Overall, like with the previous 3 heavy assault cruisers, I am quite impressed by this ship. It runs well. It looks really good. Again, one of the prettiest hull designs in the game. And really hope that the builds that you see here can help you at building your own ship. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.